So I am here in Boston at a fancy B&B. The folks over at June's Journey have set me and two other amazing, beautiful YouTubers here for the weekend. Sure, you already know these ladies, but of course, Bernadette Banner and Morgan Donner. They are amazing, and if you aren't already subscribed to them, you should go do so right now. Go do it right now. Right now. Neither of these ladies have been to Boston before, and while I myself am not a Boston connoisseur, I figured it would be fun to set them up on a little tour of Boston. What makes a better tour than a morbid history, murder, ghost tour? Mostly because I myself have always been curious with the kind of darker history of Boston, and I don't hear about it much. So I decided to do a little research and give them a little bit of info, and then I will provide you with convenient infographics to explain the stories a little bit more in depth. Like I mentioned earlier, this video is sponsored by June's Journey, and we will talk a little bit about that later. But for now, let's get started with the tour. This tour off right. First spot in our little tour, this is the location of the Great Elm, which Boston used to do public executions on until 1769, and then it became a public gallows until the tree finally blew down in 1876, I think. Let me check that. Yes, 1876. So as you can see, there is no tree here, but there is a convenient, hard to find little plaque. If you read it, "Here the Sons of Liberty assemble. Jesse Lee, Methodist pioneer, preached in 1790. Conveniently does not mention the fact that many people were hanged on the tree back in the day. Much like other places during this time, executions were a public affair, and huge crowds would turn up to watch. At the time, Boston was strictly Puritan, so anyone who didn't adhere to the biblical principles was exiled. If they were to return, they were sentenced to hang, as was the case for a Quaker named Mary Dyer. Aside from religious dissenters, in which I was doing air quotes, like Quakers, executions of criminals, Native Americans, and 4 people convicted of witchcraft also met their end on the tree. So this is the house of Dr. George Parkman, who on November 23rd, 1849, was murdered and dismembered. So this was kind of Boston's crime of the century, and it was very, very heavily reported, mostly because of the social status of the murderer and murderee. Okay, so I'm going to give you the real SparkNotes version of this murder. So there are 3 main players here. George Parkman, who was a fancy-pantsy upper-class Boston elite, John Webster, who was a lecturer at Harvard Medical School, and Ephraim Littlefield, the janitor at Harvard Medical School. And I am so sorry, I probably butchered his first name. Speaking of butchering. So the story goes, in 1842, Webster borrowed money from Parkman, then basically kept accumulating more and more debt, so in 1849, Parkman sought out a confrontation with Webster. It would have probably gone something like this. Bitch better have my money. On November 23rd, Parkman was out collecting debts as usual. Webster visited Parkman's home and asked to meet at the medical college at 1:30 p.m. At 1:45 p.m., Parkman was last seen entering the college. After Parkman had been missing for a few days and his family was a little more than concerned, Littlefield became nervous, as people were starting to look at him for the disappearance. He also was suspicious since Webster was acting odd. On November 30th, Littlefield chiseled away at the wall under Webster's private lab. This took a while, he took a break, and then the next day he finally punched a hole in the wall, only to find a human pelvis, a thigh, and a part of a leg. After more searching by the police, they found partially incinerated body parts, bones in the furnace, a trunk full of more body parts stuffed inside body parts, and overall just not a great time. After a long back and forth classic game of whodunit, with blame shifting towards the janitor, because of course it was, Webster finally confessed that he killed Parkman in an act of self-defense after he became aggressive, more air quotes, over the debt. So of course the only logical thing to do is chop him up and play the grossest game of geocaching ever. So this is the King's Chapel burial ground. It was founded in 1630 and it was Boston's only burial ground for 30 years. And as you can imagine, because it's such an old spot and is in fact a cemetery, it has a lot of tales that go with it, some of which may be a little bullcrap, then some of it may actually have some truth to it. One of these tales includes a man that was buried alive, and by the time they realized, oops, and dug him back up again, he was in fact dead. Another one of these stories includes a woman whose grave was made too short for her. The grave diggers cut off her head and put it in between her legs. So those are a couple of the spirits that are said to roam here. Quite understandably, I would be pissed too.
Another thing about these graveyards that's really interesting is the imagery on the old tombstones. Since the early settlers of Boston were Puritan, their ethos was basically piety, hard work, education, etc. Their religious views banned anything considered to be extravagant and also had pretty strict views on who actually gets into heaven or who is just left to rot, which led to getting a little creative with tombstones. The most common motif was a winged death head, band name called it, with a simple inscription, "Here lies the body of ... Later they got a little fancier with images of skeletons, father time, and with some emo poetry about the inevitability of death meant to scare visitors into piety.
Welcome to the Omni Parker Hotel. So this is the oldest operating hotel in the United States. It opened in 1855, and it is host to many famous characters, including Charles Dickens, John F. Kennedy, and John Wilkes Booth, who, fun fact, stayed here shortly before assassinating Abraham Lincoln, and he was seen practicing in the firing range in the vicinity. History.
The Omni Parker House Hotel, which is a frequent mention on lists like 5 of the most haunted hotels in the world. Ooh. There are quite a few ghostly sightings said to be chillin' in this place. Why did I write that? On the 9th and 10th floors, a colonial bearded gentleman is said to be seen supposedly looking concerned. People say it's the founder Harvey Parker, wondering if the guests are enjoying their stay. What a swell guy. Room 303 is what inspired Stephen King's 1408, with strange shadows and bathtub water turning on randomly. It was eventually turned into a storage closet, so you know there's some Fantasia shit going on in there at any given moment. The elevator frequently stops on the 3rd floor without pushing the button. Charles Dickens used to stay on that floor and is said to still haunt the mirror that he practiced reciting A Christmas Carol in. Also, actress Charlotte Cushman died on the 3rd floor in 1876. Bad vibes all around.
So the last stop on our little Morbid history tour is the site of the Boston Molasses Massacre, or as some of the locals apparently call it, and I just learned this on my phone, the Boston Massacre. So this massacre happened when a tank holding 2.3 million gallons of molasses ruptured, sending a 15-foot wave of molasses traveling at 35 miles per hour throughout the north end. Unfortunately, the term slow as molasses does not really apply to this situation, because this extremely fast wave of molasses ended up killing 21 people and injuring 150.
The explosion is thought to have happened because of an increase in temperature for a January day. The thermal expansion of the molasses, mixed with the not-so-great condition of the tank, led to it bursting at 12:30 p.m. Witnesses reported hearing a tremendous crashing and a deep growling, a thunderclap-like bang, and machine gun-like sounds as the rivets shot out of the tank. And when you sit back, it's pretty terrifying to think about a literal tidal wave of molasses heading towards you at 35 miles per hour. When you first think of molasses flood, you sort of think of maybe The Blob, or that one scene from Austin Powers. But in reality, it was not like that at all. For reference, the record for the fastest running speed by an Olympic athlete was 27 miles per hour. This molasses also would have had shards of metal from the tank, as well as pretty much anything it picked up along the way. And as the morbid cherry on top of this proverbial pie, all the while this was happening, the air would have smelled sickly sweet. Speaking of sweet, no, we're not going to do that. Let's talk a little bit about the whole reason the three of us were brought together in Boston this weekend. In case you guys haven't seen Bernadette's video about this massive new update to June's Journey, go check it out. We created a club and chose our name and little design. So the main feature in this brand new update is called the Detective Lounge, and basically what it is it allows a more social aspect to June's journey. Like we did, you can create clubs where you and your friends can face off against other teams, give coffees or energy to each other, and a bunch of other features. And now it's time for a showdown. We faced off against the community manager team over at June's Journey in a game of Spot the Difference, which was intense, and basically all conversation ceased as we put on our observation pants. Usually your team will get matched up randomly, but I guess the June's Journey team wanted to see what we were made of. In this game, you basically compete against the other team to see who can spot the difference quicker and with as many objects as you can find. After complete concentration and the occasional shouting of random items that we found,
Ladder, cat, apples, jerry can.
Oh, goat. Oh, wait, no, he's fine.
the score ended up being pretty dang close, so we decided to test our skills in a game of Time Rush. If you want to see how that riveting competition ends, go watch Morgan's video. And again, thank you June's Journey for sponsoring this video and bringing us all together for the weekend. To check out not only this brand new update, but also the main game, which is a 1920s hidden picture game, you can go download the game for free through the link in the description. And that concludes our little Morbid history tour around Boston. Make sure you go check out the other two ladies' amazing videos, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!
Hello.
Hello?
Rabies.
Hi, bud.
Stop.
Bye. How much you got in there?
No wonder my back was so. Well, this explains it. Wow, this is so light now.
Wow, you're like one of those machines at the arcade. Popping out tokens.
España, 2016. €1.
Add it to your,
You're rich.
add it to your pile.
Don't judge me.
That was not a good face. That was
Whoa.
set dressing. Oh yeah. We're professionals.
Doing shenanigans, Miss Bernadette.
This is like a commercial. Yes. You make me want one of these lamps. I'm sold.
Do it. You need one.
I guess I'm sort of in your background. No wonder you're not doing anything.
It's an Easter egg.
Me eating Pringles.
Can you spot Bernadette eating Pringles?
Oh.
Folks over at June Journey,
M for murder and M for morbid. Or, if you like, W for wumbo. Wumboing.
Just make sure I don't have boogers. This is why I should script out my videos, honestly. Sorry. Okay. Nope. I hate that.
No. Where's the bottom?
Yeah, what is the purpose?
What is this?
Wah!
The only difference, I'll be honest with you, is that on Saturday night,
And they were roommates. Spirits.